Hi everyone, and welcome back to Project No Buy. Today, we reaffirm No Buy 2025. So in some ways, this video is kind of a reintroduction, reintroducing Project No Buy. And this is kind of a result of what happened in January. And I have not really addressed it yet. I posted my January recap, and in that video, I had not yet fully processed or even received everything that I had ordered in January. I had not yet understood the scope of my failure. And, I'm not trying to dwell on the fact that it's a failure for my challenge or indulge in too much self-flagellation about it. But I did want to come on here and kind of set the record straight as far as my intentions, my goals. And in doing so, I guess, I've decided to reinstate Project No Buy and almost give it a kind of restart and go from February 2025 until February 2026. And this will span the times of Christmas this year and my birthday next year. And I'm also going to be removing exceptions. So the exceptions for holidays, and this has come about because of the fallout, the feelings, the ickiness, the realizations I've had after kind of allowing myself to fail so hard in January 2025. Because ultimately, I can sit here and tell you my justifications and all that until I'm blue in the face and until everybody's super annoyed at me. But I did this to myself. I allowed myself to do it to myself, and I'm going to pick myself back up and not allow that to happen again in a kind and gentle way, in a way that allows for more success because of several really exciting mental reframes that I've had in the reflections that I've done since making all those purchases. I'm also going to be doing a little postscript in this video to address the budget concerns that were brought up in the video where I shared my hypothetical budget. So there were some comments about how the budget should be equal between me and my husband, and how my hypothetical budget left out a lot of unforeseen categories, perhaps. And I'm going to be addressing all that at the end of this video, so if you were interested in that, you can stay till the end. Okay, so back to the beginning. About 2 weeks ago, I shared the video of January's recap for 2025, which was supposed to be part of Project No Buy. And what happened was that the month of January looked almost like a month that would have happened before I did any no-buy challenge at all. So it kind of looked like the years before 2024 as far as what I purchased, how much I spent, and how I kind of approached shopping and how I kind of let every little justification win in that month. And again, I can't really say that any of those justifications are worth compromising for. And I had some really great suggestions actually in the comments. So thank you so much for those, suggestions to the effect of make something that you have to do before you make a purchase next time. Make a designated time for purchases so that you have to wait until that time. Also, I had a really interesting suggestion to catalog all of my justifications for the things that I've purchased and kind of share about how legitimate those were or are or, may not be now looking back. And I actually think that's a really fantastic idea, and I will commit to doing that. I'm actually going to think about doing that for everything I bought in 2024, since I do have a record of that on this channel. And if I'm ready, I might still not be ready to see it with clear eyes as far as what I bought in January. Although I do kind of think that all of the justifications are kind of total BS right now, like where I'm sitting today. And so maybe I can add on January of this year as well. Maybe I can kind of lump that into the 2024 unintentional spending spree. Or again, I did it to myself, so I have kind of qualms with saying it was totally unintentional, but it's not what I wanted to happen, right? Not lining up with my values, spending sprees that happened in 2024 and January 2025, all the while I was supposed to be on a no-buy challenge. And I see that my sign is a little bit cut off in this video. Apologies for that, but hopefully those of you who are not new here will know what this looks like. This is my kind of DIY Project No Buy sign. Come back for the next video if you're bothered by having it cut off like this. So I was actually fairly upset by the fact that I failed so hard in January, even if I didn't necessarily express that in the January recap. So again, part of the reason is that I don't want to dwell too much on the negative emotions, the guilt, the shame, the kind of self-punishment that can come up after setting rules for yourself and then failing. But I also don't want to just gloss over things like this either, because it's not the example that I want to set. It's not the way that I want this to go, and it's not what I want to model for those also trying to change their consumer habits. I want to show people that it's possible to be successful and, dare I say, even enjoyable when you get to a certain point, to change your mindset and reframe things, and that it can become easy. And I could be deluded sitting here today, kind of in the fresh aftermath, relatively fresh, of January's failures. But from where I'm sitting today, I have had some mental shifts that have reframed how I think about buying things that I don't strictly need. And so I'm going to kind of get into that in the context of, again, one of the comments that I received on that January recap video. But first, I will address the comments on the earlier videos, when I first introduced Project No Buy 2025, that said that the exceptions I was having there could be my downfall. I now realize that this is totally correct. And that's why I'm removing the exceptions for the holiday occasions, gifting holiday occasions for 2025 and January 2026. I understand now that the exceptions should be unnecessary. And it's something that, now that I've seen it like this, I don't know if I can go back and unsee it. I wasn't necessarily ready to understand that at the time, or to forego the indulgence of the holiday gifts, but I think I have come around. And again, back to the comments on the January recap that helped me kind of lay this out for myself, my own mind, and maybe for those of you on here watching. So I have had comments to this effect before, but there was a comment on the January recap that went like this. Also, I wanted to say something about the concept of treating ourselves. I think it's an unhelpful and kind of weird concept. You, generally you, either have the money for it or you don't, and you either have a use for it or you don't. I'm not sure where the concept of a treat would fit in that. It feels like the antithesis of conscious consumerism. Whether you have the money for an item is easier to know than whether you have the use for it, but I think since you are doing a no-buy, you can approach purchases with the assumption that you have no use for them. And I had a massive kind of light bulb moment here, especially when I read that part about how it feels kind of like the antithesis of conscious consumerism. And I know some of you have been trying to tell me this in various comments on various topics for a long time. I've read the comments about how treating yourself is kind of a weird concept, and, the video about the $500 jeans, like, people were kind of confused about how this could be an action taken by somebody who's trying to be a more conscious consumer. And I understood cognitively, right? Like, I could agree and I could say, yes, I understand on the surface, but I wasn't ready to fully understand in the core of my being why. Like, I didn't, it was like being able to do math, but without really fully understanding why. And, I'm not a mathematician. Why do I keep using math examples? I think this has happened before. But I could do the sums. I could add 2 + 2 and multiply 5 times 5, but I wasn't aware of how the numbers were working in there, like, these are very simplistic equations, right? So maybe that's not the greatest example, but, I could get the right answer, but I couldn't show the work to get there. I didn't have it inside me. So anyway, after more dedicated reflecting and kind of living in the fallout of failing in January of this new no-buy year, I do feel like I've reached the moment of true understanding. And maybe it took one more birthday to realize, one more kind of generally acceptable treat yourself time, where indulgences are kind of expected or set up as a cultural norm, to really understand that it is the antithesis of conscious consumerism in a way. And that's not to say that it has to be wrong and has to be something that everybody abstains from all the time, but it is something that I have realized now is almost more of a moral decision for me. And I hesitate to say that because I am not saying it's a general moral issue for humanity. And, I don't really know the definition of, when you say something is a moral thing, does that automatically apply to everybody? Like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. And again, I've had discussions about whether it's my values or my morals. But the thing with that is that I've had sustainability, and, I'm not perfect in that regard, but I've had sustainability as a value for a long time. I've had frugal living as a value for a long time. I've had minimalism gently, like not having more than you need is kind of what I'm trying to say here, as a value for a long time. I've had not wanting to support fast fashion and damaging industries for a long time as values. But I would still act out of line with those values. And I think by bringing it into personal morals, I will have a reason to not act out of line with the values. Because if I say I have these values, but I do these actions that communicate that I don't really believe them, like buy things I don't need, is it really an instance of me having the value or me just saying that I have the value, right? Like, I can have a sign up that says, I don't support eating meat, for example, and then I can sit here and eat a steak. And then I'm obviously, I bought the sign that says I don't support eating meat, but what my actions are signifying to you is that I don't believe in my value, even if I have it on my t-shirt, on my forehead. My action is what shows my true values. And so me, by acting in the way that I have in January, by buying things that I don't truly need, is not having the values. And, maybe for some people you can have a value and you just have it, right? Like, it's not just, oh yeah, I think it would be great to be more sustainable. And I really do believe that in my core as a person, I think that's the thing we should do. And you just do it. But for me, and let me know if this is kind of true for you too, and let me know. I'm so curious, actually. Like, maybe there's just something weird about me. But I was able to have a value as far as, I think that would be great. I'm going to try. I really believe this is the way to live, but I could still fail. And, I don't know if it's just me, because I have read stories about people trying to become vegan and failing and finding it really hard, even though they really strongly believe that animals shouldn't be raised for slaughter and treated poorly, animal rights and all that. So, like, I don't think it's just me, but you can let me know in the comments below. It might just be me in regards to buying things I don't need, but again, what we see in influencer culture begs to differ, I guess. And so anyway, I have finally arrived at this point, and I'm actually really excited about it. So, yay. But I've arrived at this point where I realize that buying something that you don't need as a treat or for any reason, really, is not conscious consumerism. It is, like the commenter said, the antithesis of conscious consumerism. It is a willful choice to act against your values / morals, or however you or I need to think of it, to make it work for ourselves. It is a demonstration of not really believing in our values. And, if I were to compare it to something that I do view as a little more moral, like, let's just say lying, something not serious, but I think it's kind of morally wrong to lie unless there is an extremely valuable reason for it. So in this scenario, lying is a synonym for buying things you don't need. So I do think it's wrong to just buy things you don't need. That's true. Unless there is an extreme need for it, a genuine need. So it doesn't have to be extreme, but unless there is a genuine need for it. So, the times where it's better to lie than not, we can accept that lying is still not ideal, but it's better than the alternative in the given scenario. And so, when you genuinely need something to survive or to improve your quality of life, you can accept that buying something that you don't strictly need is ideal, for survival, for human survival, but it's preferable to the alternative in the scenario. And, this is not to say that something like a frivolous hobby or, could be frivolous to some people falls in that category of things that you don't strictly need, right? This is where the gray area begins, I guess. So this is where I'll share, I suppose, that I'm not yet at the point where I'm going to say, makeup is a category that humans don't even need, so I'm not going to buy or use or wear any more makeup. I'm not there yet. I guess in this hypothetical example, my purchase of a makeup product is where it's worth to tell a lie, a metaphorical lie, or, to demonstrate me not living in with my values as far as buying something I don't strictly need. But if I am able to consume consciously and buy no more than I will actually use up and use regularly, it becomes a situation where the alternative of just not using the product is not yet the better option for me. And again, for people who don't even use makeup, you might already, you might be looking at me on the screen being like, girl, you are going to get there at some point because it's a category of things you don't need. And when you realize that, that's all kind of crap or whatever, it's not worth the fun you think you have out of it or whatever, there are probably people who are already there. And I may get there too. I don't know. I can't predict that level of, future value adjustments. But for now, I'm not going that extreme as far as adjusting my current way of life, I guess. And, I'm not here to say that not wearing makeup is an extreme thing, but I am here to say that for me, to throw out all my makeup and totally declutter my closet would be fairly extreme for my everyday life. So I'm trying to find that balance. But in terms of buying new things, I really think I've got it this time. I really think I have the understanding that is crucial to success. And that is why I am so willing to re-up my challenge, I guess, to reframe the year. I know I can only do this once, and technically, okay, you can restart and recommit anytime, but I do have a public-facing platform here, and there is something about this choice to restart that can only be done once if I want to maintain credibility and actually be somebody who lives in line with their values, right? I can't be on here slipping up and starting again 2 or 3 times a year. This is it. This is it. This is the no-buy year. And, 2024, the conscious consumerism year, was the training ground, and it just included the birthday month of 2025. That's the way I'm going to look at it. And next year, next year, 2026, January's birthday month, what a roundabout way of saying it. This year and next year's birthday are going to make up the true no-buy year. Okay, I hope that all made sense. I will be clarifying this, I'm sure, in videos to come. In fact, I do have videos that I've been deeply reflecting on why I want things as part of the fallout of buying so many things in January. And I have a whole series planned for probably March, just because the flow of ideas is fast right now, and the flow of videoing and editing and posting is slower, even though I have kind of increased February's postings back to 4 times a week. But I have a lot of ideas, and the breaking down of why I want every category of things that I want, makeup, clothing, books, tech, anything, anything that I have blanket categories. But I'm going to be doing videos on each of those categories in March to kind of break down what I actually want. And I think having kind of these ideas for the future as well will at least help me maintain the no-buy with relative ease, because I do kind of have it in the back of my mind that I definitely can't even think about buying anything. I don't even want to right now. So it's actually really hard to sit here and say this, but I have all these kind of things that I'm going to set up for myself, my future self, for when those times come, when I'm tempted by the next thing. Because I know by now that no matter how strong I feel sitting here today, there will be a time in the future where I see something and think about compromising my values or, my morals. And so I'm going to be putting those barriers up. One of those barriers being I have to get through the breakdown of everything that I want and why in March before I even think about it. So that'll take me, through another month. And then I'm going to be doing some more videos later this month of February based on the book To Buy or Not to Buy, where the author, Dr. April Benson, has some activities designed to prepare you for moments of possible lapsing and relapsing. So watch out for that later this month. And I think I have found the point of enough for me. And the point of enough for me is actually below what I currently have. This is maybe part of this realization of how buying things you don't need is kind of an immoral decision as far as where I'm concerned. Realizing that I have enough, and therefore to add to that is also why it's not a morally good thing to do. And everybody is going to have their own point of enough, but I do think that we can tell when it's drastically over that limit for any human being, right? I think that's why those commentary videos of influencer overconsumption do so well on YouTube, right? We see those. I like to watch them, but I think I finally understand now, these are the displays of exceeding enough in any reasonable parameter, right? Nobody can look at the influencer stashes of makeup and clothing and whatever else they collect, whatever they influence, and think that that's a reasonable amount for a human to own. It does dangerously normalize having more than enough, right? It increases the enough point for the general population. I've talked about this before, so I won't go too much further into that thought, but I do think we can recognize when it's way too much, but we just have to be aware that our own personal points of enough don't need to be rising, right? I guess it's kind of like lifestyle inflation. It's enough inflation, keep that down, or keep that, make sure it's at a comfortable point for you. And I have realized that I am above the comfortable point for myself. And there are reasons, I guess, for that. And I'll probably be going into those in the videos of things that I have wanted before, why I want what I want in March. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, take what you need, take what fits you out of anything I've just said as far as making shopping a moral decision, or realizing that if you overbuy past the point of your enough level, then that could be I don't want to say morally bad, because again, I don't want to put that on you. I'm not trying to say you need to feel shame or guilt unless they're helpful emotions that kind of nudge you back into line. I like to kind of view my own feelings of shame and guilt as little signals of like, hey, you might be stepping off of the path that you want to be on. So it doesn't have to be negative. You don't have to extrapolate those feelings to how you feel about yourself as a person, but you can kind of use those as signals. So anyway, take what serves you, leave what doesn't. I am not trying to put this on you, is what I'm saying here. But the fact that I have more than I need in most categories of my life, to me, is a signal that I am past that point of enough. And maybe you can do some reflection on your own kind of collections of stuff and, gently, of course, and kind of evaluate, is this really enough? Do I really think I'm at the point of enough? And therefore, would it kind of almost be bad or living against my values and therefore throwing my values out to behave in the ways of collecting more of these categories where I already have enough? I will also be talking about the privilege of no-buy and having enough in the end of February, I think. So if those feelings are coming up for you now of like, you can only say this because you're in a position of high privilege, I agree, and I will be addressing that in a later video. I do also want to acknowledge that for those of you who are not as mired in the consumer narratives as I am or I was, this may not be anything like a breakthrough for you. You might be trying to reach through the screen and, give me a little shake and say, yes, finally, like, why haven't you seen this before? How could somebody that's, educated, I can't say I'm objectively smart or anything like that, but I have an education, and how could somebody who should have a better awareness of things and should be more grounded have veered so far off course? This is how normal people think about shopping, is what some of you might be screaming at me right now, hopefully in a kind and supportive, cheerful, cheering me on kind of way. And to that I say, yes, it is frustrating that my thoughts had gotten so warped, but I'm excited that I've had this breakthrough and I can finally return to those realms of normal consumerism, not shopping for any other reason other than needing something. And, it sounds ridiculous when I put it like that. You shop when you need something. When you buy something, it's because you actually needed it. Like, that should be normal. I was originally going to do a bit of a breakdown at some point in February of everything I ended up buying in January, do the whole pie chart thing with what I spent on what category and how much of each category that I ended up buying. But I'm not actually sure that that's necessary anymore, since the kind of general breakthrough that I've experienced as a result of reflecting and reading some more sources. Honestly, I started listening to the audiobook of Braiding Sweetgrass, and maybe that had something to do with it too. But anyway, I'm not sure that it's necessary to go too deep into those details in this video after all, but I will do a super quick rundown, maybe just in the text on screen, or put a picture of the pie charts up right now, and maybe a list of categories and numbers and things like that. For those of you who want to see the full, shameful, and appalling extent of January's failure for Project No Buy 2025. But yes, that's exactly why I am moving Project No Buy 2025, the year, to start February 1st and end in February 2026, because I really do now think that I can do this in a way that I have not before. It's easy for me to say, but I can't really convey how I feel about it, as far as turning a corner or turning over a leaf and seeing the other side and realizing that now that I've seen it, I can't just turn it over and forget it exists, right? I know what it looks like. And so regardless of whether I try to turn it over, I know what's on the other side. And there's no point. I might as well leave it turned up and actually successfully execute a no-buy year, now that I think that I can. And I would love to prove myself right. And not for you, but for me. So here's to an actual no-buy year. And, if that's what you were following me for, hopefully it'll be more satisfying and more in line with what you want to see, now that I've had the recommitment today. Although that's not the motivation for recommitting, it is hopefully a positive side effect that the content of this channel will be more in line with the reasons people are here. And a final reminder that in times like these, I've seen some of the news, I've seen some friends sharing infographics. There was one about how Target has stopped participating in diversity programs. And, there's just so much floating around that isn't something that most of us probably think is great for humanity. And, whether or not we're on this side or that side and think that the general direction is positive or negative, these things are just, in my opinion, encroaches on humanity as a whole, right? Equality as a whole. And I just don't know how anybody can want to support a lack of equality, even if they support a general policy. So, not to make it political, but a reminder here that Project No Buy, one of my taglines, is that this is a gentle resistance. And it's not just a resistance towards oneself when we want to do something that doesn't line up with our values. It is a resistance, I guess, towards capitalistic society where everything you buy from a major company, big corporation, supports something that you don't really want to support. And so the way to minimize that impact is to not buy as much as possible. And the things we can not buy the most are things we don't strictly need. And so rekindling that gentle resistance among this community and trying to use our collective action as a force for positive good is another underlying mission here for Project No Buy. Okay, so let's do a quick addendum about what that means for my budget and address how not having an equal amount of the income pool is in fact more feminist and more in line with equality than it would be to evenly split the budget. So first of all, I shared in the January recap that while I originally had $200 a month of fund money, that was lowered to $150 after the amount spent in January. But that number now only exists as a hard ceiling that I hope to not need. Because the only things that I will continue to buy are legitimate replacements, which I've kind of already covered in a video that I won't actually need any, and meals out while at work. And I've actually kind of modified this to only apply to dinner, because that's the meal that is very difficult to prepare when I'm trying to leave the house at that time. For lunch, it's easier to throw together something in the morning. And so I won't allow myself to have lunch out if the double service day is morning and afternoon, unless I truly cannot prepare something that day. I have a variable schedule, so sometimes it's one service a day. Most often it's just one service a day, but some days where it's two, sometimes it's morning and afternoon, and other days it's afternoon and evening. And so it's a little bit difficult to plan my whole life to be able to meal prep on those individual days. And it also kind of doubles as my only social time outside the house right now because I have small kids and it's hard to leave. It takes a lot of planning and organization. And also most of my friends, I moved to a new city about 3 years ago. So most of my friends are from work anyway. And so the meals between services are kind of also my social time with my friends. And so I'm not willing to totally compromise on those by really struggling to prepare food when I'm trying to leave the house. And if I've foreseen it, if I plan it, month to month, it should really only be 2 or 3 meals that I'm buying out per month maximum. And so that really shouldn't break the budget. The meals are at somewhere relatively inexpensive or, not super cheap, but not like fancy dining. So the threshold per meal is about $20, which, eating out is just getting more and more expensive. So it's certainly not cheap, but if I end up spending $60 a month on socialized / in between work dining out, I'm okay with that. I also honestly don't foresee myself joining any workout classes this year or really engaging in anything else that could have an impact on my personal budget. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the no-buy exceptions, right? It's pretty much nothing at this point unless something I have totally runs out. Every product in every category is gone. And I also have maybe a different philosophy on backup products as well. I'm going to perhaps save that for another video since this one's getting a bit long already. But anyway, no products except legitimate replacements and no exterior kind of extracurriculars, probably just for the sake of time and scheduling. And the only exception or only allowed purchase is going to be food / social dining. Speaking of unforeseen expenses, I actually don't think that... Okay, so let me back up. I read the book Spent, and if I haven't shared about that already, it might have been my last video, or it might be my next video, depending on how things go as far as order. But I read the book Spent, and in that book, the author was saying that things like root canals, car repairs, home repairs, little home maintenance things should not be unexpected expenses. They should be foreseen because everything wears out, even teeth wear out. And, some people have better luck than others. But the author's point was that these should be categories that you save for. And it kind of recalibrated my tactics as far as unforeseen things coming up, in that I think the general priority for me is going to be to try to save as much money as possible and kind of pile it up. And I don't necessarily need to allocate it into specific categories if I'm just trying to prioritize having that money there. And so in a month where we need to replace light bulbs or something, I guess my idea here is that that comes out of the house repair savings budget and not out of the month-to-month running budget, if that makes sense. And yes, there are kind of times of life where it seems like every single month you're hit with something new. And honestly, I don't know if this is going to play out how I expect it to, or if it's going to continue feeling like there's something coming up every single month. But what I hope is that these unforeseens will actually be kind of saved for expenses. And so they don't have to affect the running of the budget. I am also in a situation where we moved into a house about 2 years ago, and we have all the furniture that we need. We have all the decor that we are going to have. And we're not changing that. There's no reason for us to buy any new furniture at this time. We have enough mattresses, I think, for all the people in our house. I suppose the next furniture purchase will be when the littlest baby moves into a real bed. We start them on a mattress on the floor, and it's not going to be imperative to add a bed frame for, it's not something people strictly need. I know a bed frame will preserve the life of a mattress, and so people have arguments about whether you actually need a bed frame or whether mattresses on the floor are fine. But my point is, it's a few years before we need to acquire any furniture, and other than that, there's nothing that we strictly need, and that's because of the situation that I'm in, right? If you move and if you need to factor in furniture spending, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But for my hypothetical budget, furniture and decor is not something that we need right now that we're in an established household. Toiletries and personal care are in my budget, my fun money budget, because those things should only be purchased on a replacement basis. And the other category, I guess, which was kids, is not in my hypothetical budget because it's a line item that wouldn't exist if I was on a single income and not part of a family. And so we do have a line item for kids in our budget, and that covers their activities and things that they legitimately need. And it's not that high of an amount either. We do also have my in-laws living with us for childcare / to spend time with their grandkids. And that was their choice to move here and be closer to them. So we don't have to factor that into our budget as well, thank goodness. And honestly, we probably wouldn't have had as many kids if that wasn't a possibility for us. So I guess that kind of brings me nicely onto the last point about kind of gender roles and some of the discomfort that some of my viewers felt about how my budget is not equal to my husband's, and how I was saying that he does have more kind of personal spending money than I do, and he makes much more of the income, and so I'm okay with that. It's not just because of the income that I'm okay with him having more of the budget. I actually think that in some ways, treating my money, my budget out of the money I make is the more kind of feminist way to approach it, because I want to be able to live independently. And if I were not a part of this family and have kids and all that, I would not be interested in making more money, if that makes sense. Like, the standard of life that I have for myself as a single person would be much, much lower than my husband's preferences for comfort of life, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of up to him, the standard of our life, like the kind of house we live in. I had parts in all of these choices, right? Like, I could veto things and I had a voice, right? Like, it's not that okay, but I guess where we are is that, we have slightly mismatched standards, right? So, and it's not a bad thing, right? He's not out there with champagne tastes on a beer budget, I guess. Like, he makes the money to make some of these decisions for the kind of life that he wants. And, I do knock him down a couple of pegs as far as, like, if I wasn't a part of his life, he might have a luxury car, for example. But it's not something that brings anything that we need to our lives. And so we settle for something that's actually functional and utility over luxury there. And there might come a time where our family life is different, and maybe he wants to do that again if there's more budget available or he makes more money or something. And, I can't control what he prioritizes and values in life, nor would I want to. But that's kind of why I prefer to use my own income for my own discretionary spending. And not to mention that my concept of living in line with my values, even back when I made that video, before this breakthrough realization of today, or leading up to today, even before that, my values that I would tell you, even if I didn't truly believe them because my actions didn't line up. But I would tell you that I valued not consuming, not buying, not wanting, and me being free of things to want and to buy is more important to me than having an equal amount of money to spend on things that I want to buy, if that makes sense. So if I don't actually want anything, then I don't need that money. And it's not that I don't want to help my husband become free of wanting things as well, right? Like, I would love to see him free and happy from desire, and it's not that he's ever had a problem to the extent that I have either. So the things that he does tend to want, like I've shared before, do tend to be more expensive. He likes to, well, he's into running right now, has a marathon hobby, and the other things he likes are kind of in the realms of car parts that cost thousands of dollars sometimes. And so he'll have to save up to buy the next piece of machinery, equipment, or whatever to put in the car engine. I am not, clearly don't know too much about that, but it makes sense on many levels. And it's not really about me being compensated for the work I do at home, the cleaning, the childcare, etc. That, somebody mentioned that what I do enables him to have happy kids. Well, it also enables me to have happy kids. And I kind of don't really care about what it enables him to do because it's my life as well, if that makes sense. And I am not a trad wife at all. It's not that I want to stay home and make cooking and cleaning and caring for kids my whole life and identity. Clearly I'm here on YouTube conversing about wanting to break up with wanting things and not buy things and having these conversations with the community online. All the while, I am not engaging in trad wife activities. And I still have my job with a symphony, and I'm constantly trying to get a better job, which takes a lot of time and preparation as well. So, I'm not somebody who's devoted to those things. And it's not that I don't see them as work. I feel how it can be very difficult work to do some days. But it's not just for him either, right? It's also for me. And it's a combination of that feeling, plus the reasons I've already shared, that really make me feel like it's not necessary to have equal amounts of fun spending money. And, my husband has said that he thinks it should be equal and fair. And I've said in return, I don't really want to want things that are that expensive, right? Like, I would want to not spend all of that money. And therefore, when it's an occasion for my husband to buy something he wants, I would then end up giving him my portion of the budget anyway, right? Like as a birthday gift or Christmas gift or whatever. I just talked about how I want to break up with the birthday and Christmas gifts. But again, I'm not extrapolating that on other people. So anyway, hopefully that kind of assuages some of the icky feelings that might have brought up in anybody watching. Let me know if there's any additional questions about that, because I'm happy to talk about this further and kind of break down where I'm at with that and whether or not it's actually truly equal and feminist or anti-feminist, or whether I'm going back in time as far as men's and women's roles and how we treat money in our household. I guess the final point in that regard is that my husband's not opposed to being a stay-at-home dad / doing more of the care work if if we have a role reversal at some point and I end up making more of the money. That was how it worked the first year we had a baby. I was teaching at a school and he was home full-time, or, home and doing freelance work around my teaching schedule. So anyway, I'm still kind of dancing around other questions regarding conscious consumerism, such as the "can I afford it" question that I either shared in the last video or will share in the next one. But it is very satisfying to be able to share in today's video the realization that I've been dancing around for even longer before that, about how I'm able to do these things that don't line up with my values. And perhaps the answer to that being because they weren't really my values yet in a way that I truly understood. So again, whether it's reading those no-buy books, starting braiding sweetgrass, reading your comments, continuing to share, I think it all kind of combines to this effect of having this deeper understanding that I think will really lead me to success in Project Nobai 2025. And hopefully it'll help you reach the success that you seek too. All right, with that, I will wrap it up here and say bye for now. See you in the next one.